All right, moving on to other news. Hundreds of Israel's most respected former security leaders are now publicly calling for an end to the war in Gaza, saying that the goals, the objectives have already been met. They also argue that the continued fighting is eroding Israel's security, values and international standing. In an open letter released yesterday, 550 retired officials, including former heads of Shin Bet, Mossad and the Israeli military, urged U.S. President Donald Trump to step in and pressure Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu towards a ceasefire. One of the signatories is Ami Aylon, who is a former director of Shin Bet. He said, and I quote here, "At first, this was a just war, a defensive war, but when we achieved all our goals, all our military objectives, it ceased to be a just war." The letter argues that Hamas no longer poses a strategic threat and that Israel has already dismantled its military and governing infrastructure in Gaza. Among the signatories are some of Israel's most prominent figures: former Prime Minister Ehud Barak, former Defense Minister Moshe Yaalon, and 5 former heads of Shin Bet. Meanwhile, the humanitarian situation in Gaza continues to worsen at a catastrophic pace. The United Nations now warns of a widespread famine unfolding across the Gaza Strip. In just the last 24 hours, 6 more people have died of starvation, bringing the total to at least 180 starvation-related deaths since the start of the war. Doctors say even healthy children with no pre-existing conditions are now dying from malnutrition. And that's due to the complete absence of high-calorie food and nutritional supplements in Gaza. In central and southern Gaza, at least 10 civilians seeking food aid were killed by Israeli fire near humanitarian sites, bringing the total number of people killed trying to access food to more than 1,000 right now. Most of them reportedly shot near distribution points. Aid drops continues, but desperate Palestinians, many of them children, are risking their lives just to retrieve a bag of rice or a can of food. And in hospitals, bodies are being wrapped in blankets instead of white shrouds due to exhausted supplies. The shortage took place due to the border restrictions on imports and the overwhelming number of daily deaths. And well, for more on this, we're now being joined by Scott Lucas, Professor of International Politics at Clinton Institute University College, Dublin. He's joining us live from Wicklow. Welcome to WION, Professor Lucas. First up, your assessment of the current situation at hand, where the former Shin Bet chiefs and Mossad, they all are appealing for an end to the war in Gaza.
Since Hamas's own mass killings of October 2023, and then the response by the Netanyahu government with mass killings and now starvation, many in Israel have been opposed to that. Many have said to the government, look, we want our hostages back held by Hamas. But this attempt to, quote, destroy Hamas, which winds up killing now more than 60,000 people in Gaza, most of them civilians, this images that you've been showing on your screen of what is now going to be mass starvation, this is not the way to do it. And what you had was this very visible sign by this letter by almost 600 former Israeli security officials, and you mentioned some of them, the former Prime Minister Ehud Barak, the former Defense Minister, Mr. Yaalon, 5 former heads of the Internal Intelligence Service Shin Bet, at least 5 former heads of the Foreign Intelligence Service Mossad, former heads of the Israeli military. You know, these were amongst the most important people in Israeli politics, Israeli society, and they're saying this has to stop. It has to stop in part because of that humanitarian issue, but it has to stop also because Israel is not going to destroy Hamas. They're not going to get the hostages back just by doing more of the same. And all they're going to do is to isolate Israel in the eyes of the international community. And we've seen tangible evidence of that in recent days with more states, the UK, France, Canada, either recognizing or provisionally recognizing a state of Palestine. But the big question here is, will the Netanyahu government listen? And as I speak to you, the Netanyahu government is debating two options, neither of them for a ceasefire. One of them is to maintain the current operations, where they control about 75% of Gaza, but they just keep attacking. The other is to try to occupy all of Gaza. And that would be a long-term occupation. Because even though Israel is isolated over this, they have one important backer, and that's the Trump administration. And Benjamin Netanyahu does not want to stop as long as he has that backing from the United States.
Right, Professor Lucas, you made that valid point there, that will the Netanyahu government listen at this point of time? Because prominent leaders from Israel are asking Bibi to stop the war in Gaza, but Benjamin Netanyahu's allies, they are urging Netanyahu to fully go forward and occupy the Gaza Strip. My question to you is that, could this move pressure Netanyahu's government? And what does this tell you about the divide or the direction of the war that we are seeing right now?
I don't think it will shift the government, despite the fact that this is significant opposition. Because remember, families of the hostages, including those who are still held by Hamas, and about 20 of them are still alive, they want an end to the Israeli attacks. And Netanyahu's not listening to them. And that's for two reasons. One is he has, as you've just mentioned, hard-right ministers in his cabinet. His national security minister, Mr. Ben-Gvir, his finance minister, Mr. Smotrich, who want not only to take over all of Gaza, they want Gazans out of the territory. And secondly, the day that Benjamin Netanyahu stops attacking Gaza, unless he has all of the hostages back, and unless Hamas is, quote, destroyed, is the day that he faces early elections in Israel and that he faces trial on bribery charges. It's in his interest to keep this going.
Right, Professor Lucas, thank you so much for joining us here on Beyond with your insights.
Thank you.